Irene Merrell Gale. In writing my history of Bluebell, it has come to me that I am the oldest one living who came to Bluebell at the very first. Perhaps I will have the pleasure of finding some left as old as I. I was born 23rd April 1898 at Naples, Utah, near Vernal. My father, William Porter Merrill, loaded his family of 5 children and his wife, Mary S. Luther Merrill, and their 2 covered wagons in Naples, Utah, April 7, 1908, to take us to an unnamed place on the Indian reservation to make a home on 40 acres of land, filed on by Uncle Albert Mott. Father got the 40 acres by paying the filing fee. Uncle Albert got the rest of the 120 acres. Father had gone to the land and got logs out of the forest to make a large one-room house of 17.5 feet by 21 feet. There were 2 windows, 2 doors, and a dirt roof. The windows and doors were not in the house as yet, but we had them in the wagons along with the furniture Father had made when he wasn't farmed. The furniture consisted of a lovely large wardrobe, which held our clothes, with 2 large drawers in the bottom. There was the place to hold our clothes and a shelf above. I think it would be at least 7 feet high. This was put in the bottom of one of the wagons on its back and loaded with more than our clothes. The doors were closed and quilts put on it, then a cupboard which had glass windows that was also filled with other family belongings. We had to be very careful that our kitchen cupboard windows did not get broken. There was a table that had leaves, which could seat at least 10 people easily. We had a washstand on which to put the wash basin. This had a drawer and doors with a place behind to hang the towel. There was also a chest that was 17 inches wide, 16 inches high, and 31 inches long. It was in this chest that my baby clothes were placed. I have it yet. I mention this furniture as it is still being used. The doors of the furniture were painted with a grain-like wood paint. All the furniture was made from pine and very carefully done. We were very blessed to have places to put things, as some who came to the reservation did not. Of course, we had a wood-burning stove, 2 wooden beds, and 42 yards of hand-woven carpet. Mother had woven this out of cotton cloth from old dresses, etc., each piece about 1.5 inch wide, sewn together and made into balls to store them, until enough was collected in order to weave. We certainly do not do that now. On the way from Naples, Mother's uncle Jacob Olson drove the wagon with the furniture, and Father drove the one with the family, food and bedding. We traveled together in case there might be any need to help either one. The first night traveling, we camped at Fort Duchesne, where a regiment of soldiers were stationed for the purpose of protecting the homesteaders from the Indians. At this time, the Indians were not bothering people much. However, the officers at the fort were selling the Indians liquor to drink. The night that we were there, the Indians were making horrible noises as they raced their horses along the road where we were camped by the river. I felt like we were in a war. I know my mother was up most of the night with the baby. Elva, which also gave me more of a feeling of security. We had had many Indians at our home in the Naples and Jensen area, but they had never before behaved so with such noise. I came to our new home feeling much more fear for them. When we arrived at our new home, it was all really dark, but Father soon had a lighted lantern hung up to see how to make the beds on the floor. Mother and Father that night, Bluebell the little known, and it still does when I go back. Father was up early getting the doors and windows in place and the furniture arranged. Of course, our stove had to be put in with the stovepipe arranged perfectly for the smoke to go out. Now we just plug it in, turn it on, and cook. We had always had straw ticks to sleep on, and had brought them with the straw still in. Also, we had our nice hand-woven carpet to put down, but no straw to go under it as in our old home we had left. We did not want to take the straw out of the ticks, so later we went into the cedar and pulled the inner bark off to use in place of the straw. We rubbed it with our hands to try to fluff it up. It certainly took some time to get enough for our large floor. We had slivers in our hands for some time. It is something the folks of today will not need to do, ever. Later, after more rooms had been added, the woodwork was painted white. The panels and the doors were also white with a contrasting light green paint around them. The window casing, most likely, were often painted green. When Father added the additional rooms to our house, the floors were hand-scrubbed, which had a pretty wood finish. The floors were scrubbed by Mother on her hands and knees, using a scrubbing brush, paint, and soda and soap. Mother did this, by herself, until the rest of us were large enough to help. Water, at first, was brought in barrels loaded on wagons from the Dry Gulch Creek. Later, the men worked to get a canal to bring water to the area for the farming. My part in that was to take the poor little horses to the area of the cedar trees, where there was some grass when Father brought them home from a day of work. Early the next morning, I would go get them so Father could go to work again. The working equipment consisted of shovels, scrapers, spirit levels, and plans, and a great desire to get water and make homes. What a joy it was to have new people come to the area. It was fun to have our cousins and other folk around us. When we first arrived, we got our best clothing on each Sunday morning, and our parents would read to us from the Bible and Book of Mormon. This made these books our special friends and neighbors. We certainly learned much. We had done the same thing when we lived on the Green River and could not cross the river to get to any church meetings. As the folks moved into the area, we would invite them to come to our home to join in a home Sunday service with us. It was so good to have some classwork. In the summer, we would hold some of the classes outdoors. The time came when it was decided we was old enough folk to have an organized branch. We had had enough. Everyone felt close together as we met for our great times, parties and dances. No one had much, but we all shared. Whenever a house was being built, everyone came to help put it up. I am so glad that I had this training in the early days of Bluebell, even before we voted for it to be named Bluebell. The naming of Bluebell came about during a meeting held at our home after Father had gone to Roosevelt to see if a Sunday school could be organized. He had ridden his horse there as it was the closest place with people to do the church having authority to give such permission to hold a meeting with the young folk here in the area. He had been perhaps my mother or Effie Powell. I do remember how full our big living room at our house was with all the folks from the town in attendance. It was exciting when the suggestion that the town be named Bluebell was coming from Aunt Barry, Mary Lisby, was accepted 100% by the folks. Everyone thought the name Bluebell was very right as the meeting took place in the spring of the year when these beautiful flowers were very much in evidence. Everyone also agreed the name should be one word, Bluebell. At this time, the Elmer and Ella Gale Granary became a public building for Sunday school, dances, and parties. I remember that Elmer Gale's granary was down in the sagebrush by his house. It was a lot of fun getting it ready for church and Sunday school. We could sweep it crossways, and the dirt would all be down in the cracks by the time we had swept across to the door. It did not matter if the wind came and blew it up through again. What fun to dance there. No one had to move their beds out of their houses so we could dance. I did not go to school in Bluebell the first year we were there. I went to Naples, Utah, where I lived with Aunt Esther and Grandpa Libert. I loved them and was thankful to be able to attend school, but I was so lonesome. Elva the most of all. I missed my parents also, and I would think of everybody else going to school and sitting around the big table in Effie and Heber Powell's house. Mother had told me about it in a letter. I was in the 4th grade with my sweet Aunt Esther as teacher. I had many friends as well as Aunt Esther's special teacher friends around me. I loved them all, and still do, but I wanted to be in this first wonderful school at home. My father freighted from Price, Utah, to Vernal, Utah to make some cash. I was able to go home for Christmas to Bluebell. It took us 2 days to travel from Vernal to Bluebell. We got cobblestones heated on the stove to keep us warm with our quilts and blankets. Oh, it was fun to be home with the folks and friends. One night there was a surprise party for me. My mother had me hide behind a curtain. We had to cover the area in which we hung our coats, and then in came all the folks. There were all the good old sagebrush dancers, hide-and-seekers, ball players, and their parents. My heart was so full I could hardly stand it. What fun we all had. I remember the Christmas party with a program and dance which was held at Heber and Effie Powell's. I got to dance with all the boys and most of the men. The men danced with all the ladies and girls. I think I was 11 at that time. I was able to go with my daddy to help him when the church house was being built. He let me put the first rock in for the foundation. I could help measure things. I wish every girl could have the joy I had there with the first shops. No wonder the history of this town for me. I can hardly wait to read the history of the rest of the folks that lived in and around Bluebell all these years. When the Bluebell branch was organized, the boys began to get ready to take with us as we traveled to Altona, Upalco, and Bonita. We would sit along the sides of the wagon boxes and lie in the middle on the rocks with quilts over them and us. The boys, such as Ross Lissaby and my father, who went with us most of the time, would drive the horses. One New Year's dance, my father had not gone with us to Altona. We took our rocks into the dance hall the same as we usually did to be heating for our return trip home. Soon after 12 o'clock, Alice Winkler Matthews and I thought it was time to go home as always, so we looked among the quilts in the wagon where we could cuddle down that time. Was in Brother Thompson, the mail carrier in a dance. He came in charge of the dance as it was a church boys had decided to keep Alice and me dancing without a stop. That was fine with us as we had a little rest. I loved to dance. We had a good bunch of young people and we truly had good times together. The parents, too, were at our parties. When the Bluebell branch was organized and the church house started, we were all enthused to get the timber from the mountains, have it sawed, and ready to do other home-crafted items for sale. I remember making a pillow with violets on it that brought 25 cents. I wonder where the money came from, for it did not seem that anyone had any extra. It was the cash money that was raised by the women that bought the nails, windows, and other items that we could not make ourselves. One of the quilts I remember being made had numbers which sold for 50 cents each. The one who had the lucky number got the quilt. Effie Powell needed the quilt very much. She dreamed that she got it with a certain number, but when she got to the party, the number she had dreamed about was already sold. She was disappointed, but bought another number, which was the number 13. When the numbered tickets had been taken out of the hat, she knew she had been blessed, as it was her number 13 that had been drawn out. In the church house, we had a hardwood floor which we could wax and have a very good dance floor. There was no rough stuff in our church house. We had gas lanterns which made a good light. Then came the carbide gas, best in the country. People came from miles around to attend the dances. I remember when the Maiton Bridge was finished and a big celebration held. My father, Bishop William Porter Merrill, took a wagon load of young folks there to camp out and enjoy the celebration. We had 2 tents for the group. It seemed like a fair with all the folks camped all over. The governor of the state of Utah was there, as well as soldiers from Fort Duchesne. The parts I remember the best was seeing all the old friends from Vernal that were there. They had dances, programs, races with prizes, and the Indians that were there in great numbers performed some of their dances. We had 3 days full of fun and activity. I also. My brother Harold and I, with several others, had a good time. We slept most of the way home in the back of the wagon box. Another memory that is vivid in my mind is the time Sylvia Hancock Goodrich and I hypnotized a calf. We had been to an activity where a man had hypnotized some folks, so we decided to try it on a calf. After going through the procedures as we remembered them, we told the calf to run back to the yard in our pasture. Then when we snapped our fingers, it was to come back. There were other things that we told it to do, and when it was so obedient to our commands, we became frightened and ran to the house. I do not know what happened to the calf. Now, in 1982, I am so thankful that I could be raised in Bluebell, Utah, by parents who knew the gospel and did for us as the church is now wanting each family to do. As I remember, there was much to overcome, but we were happy as we worked until we were tired. We did not keep many records. How did we know people would not know what a covered wagon was like, except seeing them in pictures? It is quite interesting to me to see the wood stoves coming back. No one knows how nice cedar is to burn and how much heat there is in pinyon pine unless they have tried it. None of us had seen a car when I was little. We never saw electric lights until after I was married and had children. I never saw a train until I went to Salt Lake City to be married. I remember Luther and my father throwing their hats into the air and yelling like kids when they saw the train near Price, as they had not seen one for a while. We loved our families and neighbors, and still do. Bluebell is very special to all who have lived there. My husband, Luther Gale, came to Bluebell in February or March of 1914. He and his cousin Clifford Reed were 2 new young men who interested all the young girls. Luther had come from his mission in the Central States a few months before. In the wintertime, along with our plays, parties, and dances, we had one night weekly Wednesday when we would get together to read so many chapters from a book. Most of the times, the folks would come to the home of the bishop. Later in the evening, one time, there was a meeting for the farmers at the church house. Luther had been at the house when we were reading the book. He attended the farmers' meeting with us and then walked me home afterwards. We continued walking together for 52 years. This began in the spring of the year of 1914. During the summer of this year, we went to the Lake Fork River on a fishing trip with many of the folks from the community. Luther and his brother John did not have very good luck catching fish. Henry Allred, as he would catch fish, would drop a fish every so often in our pan. He also came to our tent later to make sure we had enough. No one else knew what we had not done so well in their fishing. We loved to give. I remember in the wintertime the many times we young people would go into his long cellar, which was filled with great bins of potatoes, carrots, turnips, and onions. I have never tasted such good, crisp, and sweet-tasting potatoes as were and are raised in Bluebell. We met there many evenings to sing, play games, or just visit. There were many things we enjoyed with our friends, and our best times as newlyweds was just to go into our new house. We worked and scrubbed the clay that was our floor. I remember once when Luther took me home, he told me how it was sweet 16 and never been kissed. Luther could fix the holes, would take care, and did so. I was shocked when he took me home. I was very shocked and told Luther, "I thought you were a decent boy." He laughed and told me he meant it. When I told my parents about it, they said there was no harm done. Interestingly enough, by the time my next birthday came, I had been his wife for 3 weeks. We were the first young couple from Bluebell getting a recommend to go to the temple. Another thing I remember on my 16th birthday was that Sylvia and Fred Goodrich's first child, Leonard, was born. I always felt special toward Leonard. We were married to April 1915 in the Salt Lake Temple. At my bridal shower, I was given a copper-bottomed wash boiler, 2 coal oil lamps, I still have one of them, pie and cake tins, baking pans, dishpan, wash basin, and an egg beater. We had a bed, dishes, spoons, knives, and forks with wooden handles, and 2 chairs that we got as we came home through Price. We bought a Stewart cook stove from Spencer's for $10. We had a one-room house with sawed logs and a dirt roof. The roof did not have much dirt on it as it was too frozen to get it. I wanted the house prettier and white, so we went up in the clay hills near the Bluebell Cemetery to gather what we called singlins. We baked it until it was really white, then pounded it into powder, which we mixed with starch, which we made with flour and water. It would be a creamy consistency when we used it to whitewash the walls of the house. On the ceiling, I put a L&L Factory, which was an unbleached muslin of a cream color. I sewed it into strips as long as the 16-foot and 14-foot wide house. This was quite a common practice among the pioneers of that time. We would start on one side of the room, tacking the factory to the ceiling logs as we went along to the other side of the room. It looked so clean and pretty with the flowered curtains we had in front of the cupboard made from 12-inch boards, which held our food supplies and dishes. We had a wooden box with legs made for a dressing table with a flowered curtain around it, as well as the corner in the room where we hung our clothes. How sad I was when it rained one day, soaking up the sand on the roof. The green boards of the roof holding the sand had shrunk so that the rainwater leaked through the cracks, bringing down mud on my pretty walls in several places as much as a foot wide. Each of the 8 times that this happened, I would go get more isinglass and repeat the whitewashing. The walls, with the knots in them, got so they looked like china and were very pretty. I was very happy when there finally was enough dirt put on the roof to stop the leaking. After our 2 first children, Damar, born October 9, 1916, and Donald, born June 1, 1918, were born, we added another room. Luther had a job in the timber, so I did the filling of the cracks between the logs. This was a hard job as the dirt was frozen at that time of the year, so I would bring it in large buckets and would use hot water melted from snow to mix it. Now, to make a long story shorter, we have had 12 lovely children. They are, in the order of their birth, Damar, Donald, Eldon, Mildred, Bruce Kent, Arvine, Vina, Lynn Liddell, Yvonne, Sterling, Everett, and Sharon. Mildred and Liddell both died when they were small, and Bruce died as a young father of 3 children. At this time of writing, we have in our family 62 grandchildren, 116 great-grandchildren, and more coming. The total family count is 237. We could have a small ward, but they are scattered over the many states in the United States. All of this started in Bluebell, Utah. Over the years when I have visited with my sister, Lucille, who still lives there in Bluebell, I have very strong and tender feelings. It always seems that I have come home, even though I have not been a resident for many years. As we drive along, the nearer we get to Bluebell, the better the air seems to become. I still miss the fine folks that I knew and grew up with as a child and young woman. As old age takes over, I still feel the joy that I knew then when living there in Bluebell, my mountain home. I live in Richland, Washington, at age 85. My husband Luther died in Orem, Utah, where we lived for some time after we came home from a mission to the East Central States from October 18, 1961 to April 26, 1962. Luther was 72 years old. He was 84 years old at the time of his death on September 19, 1969. We have been active in the church all our lives, with each of us holding many positions. After moving to Washington 5 years after Luther's death, I have been able to serve on a stake mission for 2 years. It was a joy to be teaching the truths of the gospel to many and seeing them try to be better people.